When I was 7 months old, was it? Folks moved to Preston and lived in a house right in town for a few months. Then we moved out onto a farm up what was Worm Creek, Glendale. And we lived up there until I was about 6 years old, and then we moved down to what they call Egypt. And I guess it's still called Little Egypt. And our home was, it couldn't have been over 3/4 of a mile, maybe not that far, from President Benson's home.
Oh, really?
So I've known President Benson ever since I was old enough to know anybody.
I don't know. Did your family farm there?
Yeah. Farmed and worked out for wages. We didn't, let me put this in proper perspective if I can. I don't want to degrade my dad one bit. I don't know that he was a good farmer or that he wasn't. I know he always had a big family. And I know that a lot of us, Russ and I especially, had to work off on the farm all the time. And we never collected our wages at all. Our wages were collected by our dad. It went into, and I don't know how he handled it. I don't think he ever had a checking account. Have you got are you getting the audio on that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Got to be pretty careful what to say then, haven't I?
This is on the record.
But Dad and Mother, 11 children.
And you were?
Number 5. There was 2 boys older and 2 girls older. And there was 3 boys younger and 3 girls younger. I don't think our dad treated us any different than most of the people in it at that time. It was a family affair. What was the families was the families, and if I had the paycheck coming and I needed for shoes for somebody else or grub for the table or whatever, that's where it went.
So you never felt any differently about you? That's just what you did.
That was just the way we grew up. That was the way it was. And it was that way until Mother passed away in 1934.
And how old were you?
She passed away the day before I turned 13. And there was 3 brothers and 3 sisters younger than I. And Uncle Floyd was the youngest one, and he was just 13 months old. Mother passed away in 1934. 1936, the spring of 1936, we lost the place we were living on in Preston 5th Ward, and Dad moved us up into Vaughan, Montana. I think we arrived in Vaughan, Montana on the 10th day of May. And there again he got a piece of scab ground. And I don't know how he was lucky in getting scab forms. As long as I ever knew him, he didn't have a decent farm.
What did you guys farm? Everything?
Weeds and rocks.
Yeah. Thank you. In between.
Oh, we always milked a few cows, and up in Glendale, all we had was hay and cows and a little bit of grain and 6 or 8 acres of grain here and 6 or 8 acres of grass or feed of some kind there between rock patches, and it was just a poor farm. I don't think anybody ever farmed that farm by itself and made a go of it.
How old were you when you first started working?
For wages?
Mm-hmm.
6 years old.
Are you kidding?
No, I'm not.
So like all your brothers and everybody, it was just like when you were old enough to be pitching and doing work, you went to work and...
When I went to work for at 6 years of age, Russell worked for Fred and Charlie Lann, and I worked for Fred Jensen. Fred Jensen and Charlie Lann were brothers-in-law. Lived just across the road from each other. And again, I don't want to say anything derogatory about the way my dad handled the affairs. He did the best he could with a big family, but in my opinion, Rex was always Dad's favorite. And he got to stay home and work with Dad on the farm. Russ and I had to go to work for wages, and I've told you where our money went.
Was it just like your neighbors that would just need help like with their stuff and they would hire you guys to do stuff, or did you have to like go into town and get a job, or?
Well, they were farmers. They only lived half, 3/4 of a mile from us. We walked to work every morning, Russ and I, and home at night.
So
I worked for 50 cents a day of my lunch.
And what kind of things did you do?
My first job was riding drag horse. Is that a fly up there on the wall?
Yeah.
Where's the fly swatter?
in that bucket.
It's removed to Montana. Got another scab piece of ground up there. And there again, we had to work out as much as we possibly could.
Did the girls do work, or did they just, they took care of the home and all the guys that worked and dad and all that?
When it came to thinning and hoeing and topping beets, the girls worked out in the field too. They really did. I'll never forget. I'm not sure what spring it was, we were thinning beets. And Velma and I were thinning pretty close together. Close enough that I took a whack down like that to cut. They didn't have selected cedars in. They planted just as thick as they could plant them. Strip about that wide and just thick as they could, and you had to cut them out down to one. You only wanted to leave one, leave the best one there. In the later years, they got it selected planting, and they got it planted so that they would drop 3 or 4 seeds, and then skip for 8 or 10 inches and drop 3 or 4 more, and that made it so you just had to
Take a couple out?
take 3 or 4 out and leave the rest there, but it was a lot easier thinning beets then. But anyway, back to Velma's, we was right cleaning up the very last of the spring plant thinning, And we were so happy to be getting it through, and I was so happy to be getting close to the end of it, and I guess I got a little bit rambunctious and I whacked her hand with my hoe and pretty near broke it or cut a thumb off.
Oh.
I don't remember how bad it was, but it was too bad.
Yeah.
Wow.
I hope they can understand you, because I can't tell.
Hmm?
Yeah.
Yeah, we got. So was it? So you had to do all of that by hand, like all the thinning and everything.
Oh yeah.
So you'd have like 6 acres, and you had to do it all by hand.
Yeah, yeah.
And a hole.
And
A hoe with a handle about that long. That's right. Just a little short handle hoe.
so you just get down there and.
You all day long. It's like this.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
With your butt to the sand, and your nose to the sand, and your butt to the sun, and away you went. And you had pretty good beet thinner if you could thin them. In fact, there were only a very few beet thinners that could be thin an acre in a day. A fair thinner would get 3/4. But it was back-breaking. And then you usually had to hoe them, the weeds out of them twice in the summer.
Yeah.
Then in the fall you had to top them all by hand. Guess I better throw that gun away. You can have siphon tubes. You cut a little hole in the ditch bank and let enough water get out to as near as you could. Try and get them all through to the end of the row at the same time, and it was quite a job.
So
But somehow or another we made it. We lived through it.
was that the place when you guys were living there after your mom died? Was that the place that was it your house burnt down?
Well, that burned down before Mother passed away.
Yeah, tell me about that one.
We moved from Glendale down to Preston Fishport, Egypt in November of 1927. The house burned down 13th day of April 1930.
How do you remember that stuff?
I lived through it.
I know, I can't remember last month a single day of the month when I did anything specific. You have a good memory.
It isn't things that happened a long time ago that bothered me. I can remember that, but what happened yesterday or day before, that's a sticker.
So what caused the fire? Do you guys know what started it?
Yeah. There was a widow lady and her son lived in, what did they have? 2 or 3. It was a pretty nice sized home, so that there was enough for them to have maybe 2 rooms, and we had 3 or 4 rooms, 4 or 5 rooms, I don't know. Anyway, it was on a Sunday. Dad and the family had gone to church. Velma was sick. And Rex and Russell and I didn't go to church that particular day. We were supposed to stay home in case Velma needed any help or anything. Well, I don't suppose we did what we should have. We went down over the hill from the house a little ways and started playing ball, as kids will. After we got through playing ball, or I don't know. I can't remember this part of it. Whether we saw the smoke or whether when we got up there, but Sister Newbold, it was in the spring of the year, and that home had several valleys in the roof. Not a pitch roof like this, it had several different valleys. And there was a lot of poplar trees around it. And you know how trees will shed their... How trees will shed their leaves and they blow into the valley of that roof and have dry leaves in the valley that deep. It's just a new bowl. Her stove wasn't doing just like she thought it should, so she took a piece of rag and put some kerosene on it and put it in the stove to hurry up and
Clean it out.
clean the soot and stuff out of the chimney. Well, that rag caught fire and went right up the chimney and out into those dry leaves, and that's what caused the house to...
It went from her house onto your house?
Well, it was in the
They
same
lived
house.
in the
It
same
was all the same house.
Oh.
Was your sister inside?
My sister was in the house asleep. And like I say, I don't remember how, just what. I think I remember being told that Herman Keller was our neighbor, and he was only a quarter of a mile away from us. Maybe not quite that, about a quarter of a mile away from us. And he saw it. And he was a cripple. I mean, he had one leg that was that much shorter than the other, and he used a cane all the time. But he saw it and come down there and helped, and of course they didn't have any fire departments then to speak of. The neighbors come around and just the garden hose and so on, but it was gone. There was nothing to save. We come out of that with just the clothes we had on our back and very little else. Very little else.
Was that, so what happened to you guys and to the lady and her kid that lived there?
Well, that's the, I'll get to it. Well, their name was Newbold, Sister Newbold, and his name, that son's name was Don, and he was just from, I think it was from, what, August? Till December, older than I was. And they got on a place over in Preston town, and they moved right into town. Kendall was born, and that happened on the 13th day of May. Kendall was born on the... No, I'll take it back. The house burned down the 13th day of April. Kendall was born on the 15th day of May. Mother went to Lewiston to be with her folks when Kendall came to town. Dad and Rex and Russell and I don't remember what Velma and Verla did. And I guess maybe they were down to Utah too, I don't know. Anyway, there was a guy there that had moved from his farm down to closer to town, and he had used his old home for a chicken coop. And his name was Keller, Angus Keller. He said, well, Ed, if you want to clean up that house where we've had those chickens, well, I'll do away with the chickens and you can live in there. So we cleaned chicken shit and everything out of it. Got it to where we dared go in there and eat and sleep, and I don't know how long that happened, but then we got a tent and we got a sheep camp, and the place had no cars, but in those days you had a team buggy, and instead of a car garage you had a buggy shed, and it was about as big as maybe this part of this room. You got a cook shack and put by it, and a tent and put there, and lived in it for that summer, and long before winter came. And I don't know how Dad ever got money together, but he got some material, and we built a chicken coop. It was going to be for a chicken coop, and we was going to build a new home. Well, we never did build a new home. Lived in that chicken coop that was in 30 until 36. Then we went to Montana. I was only up there 1 year and came back down to Preston. Of course, Mother was gone. She passed away before we moved to Montana. Spent that 1 year in Montana, and there was another piece of ground that was just scab ground. Spent 1 year up there, went back to Preston. And up in Montana, while we did the best we could on that hunk of dirt and worked what we could. And Dad wanted to go back to Preston, so we went back to Preston. And Rex, he hadn't graduated from high school. He was a senior in high school that year, and he stayed in Montana until he graduated, and came down to Preston. He'd only been in Preston a day or two, and Granville called from Chesterfield was down in Preston looking for hired men for help him hate. Saw Rex on the street and offered him a job, and Rex took it, and that's how we got up to Chesterfield. That was 1937. And then in 38, Russ and Stan, that's Velma's husband, and I went up and helped in the hay, and well, the rest of it's history. From then on, why, Chesterfield was pretty much our home, except for a year and a half during the war. Rex went to war, and Russ was put in 4F, and I was put in 4F.
Why was Rex?
Why was I?
No, why was Rex?
Rex went to war. Russ was put in 4F. Russ had
Rheumatic.
no. Russ had something wrong with his nose. He couldn't get enough air through his. They told him that, and I don't know how they checked it, but they told him that he would never be able to stick up with the rigorous life that a soldier had to live, because he couldn't get enough air through his nose to keep him going. So he's put in 4F for that.
So who was it that went there was 3 of you guys that went to enlist or whatever?
There was 3 that made it into service. Rex, then Harold, and Floyd.
What's 4F?
Physically unfit for service.
Yeah, so tell us the story of when you went in to go enlist. Were you by yourself or weren't you with?
Well, when I went to enlist, when I got my draft papers to be drafted, I was living in Utah with Velma and working up in Bingham in the mines. No, I wasn't working in the mines. I had been working in the mines, but I quit the mines and went to work at Remington's Arms Plant, I guess, and I got my draft papers to appear at Fort Douglas. Well, I went to Fort Douglas, and there was, I don't know how many, hundreds of men in that big old army barracks up there, big as 2 or 3 gymnasiums and plumb full of people and doctors and pushing and poking, jerking, pulling, and they kept it calling them out, and nearly the end of the day, and got down to where I was the only man left in that room. And the doctor came through the room over there in the corner and walking toward me, and he says, "We'll pay your transportation back to your local board." And I said, "I thought you said you needed men in the Army." He says, "We do." And I said, "Well, I'm just who you're looking for. I want to go to the Army." He said, "We'll be the judge of that." And by that time he was over to where I was and handed me that 4F card. Chronic rheumatic heart disease with aortic insufficiency. 4F. I said, "Well, I'm not going to go back to my local board. I got a brother living down here in Salt Lake City." By that time Russ had gotten married and was living in Salt Lake City, and I said, "I'll go down to my brother's place." He said, "Well, we'll furnish you a taxi cab down to your brother's place then." So I got a taxi down to my brother's place, and then he took me out to Velma's place. That was the end of my Army career.
What did you think about that, finding that out?
Well, when he handed that 4F card to me, he said, well, he went to leave the room, and just before he went out of the door again, he turned around and he said, "By the way, a man with a heart like yours doesn't usually live to be 35. I said, "Thanks, buddy, you sure made my day."
And weren't you a 35, Dad, when you had the heart attack in Quincy?
Just 6 months and 8 days before I turned 35, I had my first heart attack. And I thought, well, that old son of a buck, he might have known what he was talking about after all. But I'm still here. And that was in 42, June of 42. And I was working for Remington Arms Plant, and Ross Redford, I'd known him, worked for him some, and he wanted me to come and go to work for him, so I quit whatever it was I was doing and went back up to Chesterfield and went to work on the farm again, and spent the rest of my
You need to
days.
clear your throat.
Huh?
You're sounding kind of rattling.
Me? Oh.
What the hell?
But when you were, because did you guys all go to school when you were working on the farm and like doing all that stuff, or how did school go?
Russ didn't graduate from high school. Rex was the first one of our family that graduated from high school.
Was it like made an importance, or was it more important to be helping out and stuff than?
Tell him.
Well, we all had to work. No, Dad wouldn't let us go through school. I quit school when we were in Montana. I just didn't fit in at Montana. I did not like school in Montana, so I quit.
Yes, too.
And we moved down to Bancroft. So when I quit that year, that put me a year behind. And so then I laid out another year. And then I made up my mind, after I should have graduated, I made up my mind I was going to go back and finish school. Now here's where some more of the story comes in. Right there was the first time I stood up to my dad and told him I was not letting him have my wages. He came up to, I've been working all summer up there to calls, and he'd gotten part of my wages, but he come up to end of this summer and he says, I've come to get your wages. And I said, Dad, I can't let you have my wages. He says, well, I'm going to take them. And I said, no, you're not. I said, you're not going to take my wages unless you're prepared to see my way through school, pay my way through school. Because I'm going back to school. And unless you will guarantee me that you will pay me to go to school, buy all my books and my clothes and whatever it takes to put me through school, I am not letting you take my money. And of course I was, 17 or 18 then? So I started school, and I didn't start school until the 3rd day of December. November, the 3rd day of November. So football season was over. It was just time for the they call them the intramurals. I don't know what they do now or not. But that's where each class gets a ball team up and plays the other classes to see. Well, I was a junior then. After I should have been graduated, I went in as a junior. And so I signed up to play with the intramurals, and guess I ought to go back a little. My last year in Preston's high school, I made the traveling squad in the basketball. So when I played in the intramurals, I'd had a little experience in basketball, and I guess the coach could tell I knew a little bit about it. And after the intramurals were over with, he came to me and he said, Keith, you gonna sign up for basketball? And I said, well, I didn't suppose it'd do me any good. Here it is late in the season, and didn't suppose they would even let me play. Being a new man on the totem pole, I said, I didn't suppose it'd be any good. And he said, well, I think it'll do you some good. I think it'll do you some good if you'll come out and give it a try. I think it'll do you some good. So I told him, okay. So I went out and tried out for the basketball team. And here's where quite a story happened. There was a fellow there by the name of Lewis Alder. He was a little younger than I was, but he was a year ahead of me in school because I'd stayed out a couple of years, see. But he was tall. He was 6'4", I guess. And I was, 5'9", 10", whatever. And would always be chosen to be a substitute before Lewis was. I wasn't on the main five, but I was always put in as a substitute before Lewis was, and it made him mad. And he told me one day at practice, he said, "You cocky son of a bitch." I said, "Lewis Alder, you can call me whatever you want to, but nobody calls my mother a bitch and gets away with it." I said, "If you want to find out just how serious I am about this, you come outside with me and one of the others won't come back in." I'm glad he didn't go out with me. I might not have come back in. But that's what I told him. You can call me what you want, but nobody, not you or anybody, calls my mother a bitch and gets away with it. He never called me a son of a bitch again.
Good for
And-
you.
Fancy.
And later on, he come and apologized. He did. He come and apologized and said he was sorry and that he had no business calling me that. I accepted his apology. But I pulled his bluff.
And just think, the first president of our Columbia River Temple's last name was Alder.
I wondered if these little lemon drops might help your throat a little bit, but I can't get that bottle open.
Well, quite a bit of the last part of my junior year, I was on the starting lineup toward the end of the year, and then when I was a senior, I was always in the first five on the floor. I can show you pictures of that if you want to see them.
And what was the cheer, Dad?
Hmm?
What was the cheer?
The cheer.
Yeah.
Oh. They started with the captain of the team, L.C. Sorensen, he's our man. If he can't do it, Welch can. Welch, he's our man. If he can't do it, Moore can. Moore, he's our man. If he can't do it, Hebdon, he's our man. If he can't do it, nobody can.
Yay!
Is that what you meant?
That's exactly what I meant. Thank you.
And so when it come time for choosing a student body president for when I'd be a senior, they asked me if I was going to run, and I said, "No, I don't want to. I don't want to come here as a new guy and make it look like I'm showing off." So anyway, they coaxed me into running for student body president, and I finally consented and ran for president and got to be the student body president when I was a senior.
This is in high school.
A. Golden Andrews was our superintendent. He was a ornery old son of a gun. When I was a student body president for our homecoming football, we wanted to make quite a deal out of it and have a parade, just have a good time at it. Went and asked Andrews if we could do it. He says, "You can't do that." I says, "Mr. Andrews, if we say we can't, we can't, and we won't. But if we say we can, and we will." I says, "I'm not asking you to do anything about it. Don't ask you to help at all. is all I'm asking you to do is give us your permission and then get out of our way. And the other kids, members of the kids on the student council, and when we were at that meeting, how dare you talk to that man that way? How dare you talk to him that way? Well, I said, that's just the way I felt about it, and if we wanted to do it, we had to do it, and if we were gonna do it, well, I'd do it right. But we had a good homecoming, and a lot of fun. Hey, Golden Andrews, maybe I'll get and read to you what he wrote in my, if I can find it.
I've never tried to dry my own cranberries. I don't know how they turn out.
You what?
I've never tried to dry my own cranberries. Is that your yearbook?
Yeah. I guess it will be in this one.
Little chaw.
I've got stuff strung in 3 or 4 different. I've got to get-
Do you have something you want to share while we're waiting?
In the 85 or 6 or something like that.
This is when you were
Do
working.
mine look like temple hands, or that I've been wrestling with the sand? Temple sisters' nails are polished bright. Mine show I can till late last night. Their hair's in place with money spent. Mine washed in the ditch before I went. Fancy treats they bring to see. I bake for sick and company. Mine don't look like professional hands. Takes many professions to farm the land. One can tell with one quick look. I spend little time in a fashion book. But if modest clothes cover me with grace, it matters not the brand or the place. 7 children graced our nest. In my eyes, they are the best. My hands serve husband, children, church. In God we trust. He still comes first. As long as health strengthens my hands, I'll humbly serve as the Lord commands. So bottom line, anyone can see, I'm nothing fancy. I'm just me.
Nice.
Aww.
I've got here the poem. I'm not sure if I even finished it up, about Grandpa and his rugs, and the article they put in the paper about his rug making. It's pretty nice.
What was the poem?
Keith, on number 127 of those rugs he makes out of twine, you know, the kind the balers used to tie the hay that they cram in a bind. It all started one day while feeding the cows and noticing piles here and there. He thought, I can't burn that stuff, it just melts. I'll put it someplace, but where? When I was a lad, I remember the nights Mom would read and the kids would sew rugs. From big balls of rags, once shirts, pants, and socks, the project would end with warm hugs. Someone had cut or worn clothes into strips, then the strips sewn and wound in a ball. Night after night and round after round, a big rug made floors warm for all. Keith thought, I remember the way, but those strips were soft and easy to sew. I'll need a needle or something for string. Those brush handles. I'll fashion a hole. That didn't work. Shauna learned of the need. Then while cleaning at school where she worked, a miracle serpent, a needle of sorts, just waiting to help Keith, it lurked. When he got that tool, he started to fool with the twine. Now he'd make him a rug. It had open ends, equal lengths side by side. How to finish the ends was the bug. With his sharp brain, he shaped 6 strands to a braid. Then with 21 inches, a starter, he circled that length, round and round, inch by inch. Adding on, he got so much smarter. In his basement workshop with tagboard for tools, he made benches, he needed a table. 2 sawhorses for legs, he topped with a door. He determined to make rugs more stable. What would he sit on? The height must be right. More cramps he wouldn't enjoy. He tried chairs and pillows and chairs. The best one that we got from Troy. The first 2 or 3 were something to see. To complete, he tried burning the strands. But that didn't look good. Making maybe glue it would, but he finished double stitching by hand. So from dawn to dark, downstairs he would park to braid twine and sew it by hour. Then fancy he got, expansion was sought, more twine, more colors, more power. He found big bale twine was longer by far than the less knots to cut off to make smooth. More colors he found were scrounging around, different colors for rugs he would choose. My daughters-in-law, I'll make first, then my sisters and wives and my brothers. All of the sisters we have in our ward, mission friends, and many more others. Day by day, week by week, now 12 strands make his braid. Clever splicings is magic to see. To me, I'd think it would eat up his hands. He says it's easier than 3. Some of his rugs were actually named, like Joseph's coat of every hue. One we named Skunk, just pure black and white. There's patriotics of red, white, and blue. Fleming's lead feed spot said, get all you want. Foresters too met his quest. Some he has laundered due to long trips. His rugs lay from east coast to west. David took Skunk to the Othello Fair. Shauna brought home ribbons to frame. And that's not all of it. There needs to be a lot more, but the lady that came out and interviewed him and took pictures of him and the red, hot, and blue and up there, she wrote and said, Dear Keith and Idris, thank you so much for letting me ask a bunch of nosy questions, and for the hot biscuit and sauce and the rug. The rug is on the floor in my office, where I hope it will be engaged for many years to come. Some weeks this job in the newspaper takes a lot out of me, but when I tell a story like yours, it reminds me that I really do love my work. Love, Lisa.
Cool.
So that, a lot of, and I said he was on 127, but probably there's more than that by now. Because that was just, and I don't have the date. That's kind of too bad.
You're quite the writer, Grandma.
It just comes out of my pen. take a trip so we can be together. We'll have our many friends in town. We'll leave our many friends in town and talk about the weather. Our kids have grown and moved away, and we are free to wander. We'll view the beauty of the land awaiting us out yonder. But his wife says reluctantly, I have so many household chores, it's hard for me to go. Plants to water, pets to feed, weeds to chop, and lawns to mow. Besides, my dear, the girls will meet, and I will miss my club. I'd miss my hair appointment, massage, and facial rub. Let's wait a few years longer when social duties alter. We've been so very busy since we journeyed to the altar. He, a few years later, come on, my dear, let's take a walk and hobble round the block. Then, while we're out a-strolling, we'll have a long, long talk. She says dejectedly, I have a hitch in my get-along, and my corns and bunions throb. Arthritis is so painful, I nearly gasp and sob. We'll wait a while, I'll take a pill. Tomorrow we may go. Then maybe we can stroll a block, if we take it very slow. He says remorsefully, so long, my dear, please watch for me. I'll find you some bright day. Then we'll stroll together some grand celestial way. She says, if you'd return and be with me, I want the world to know. We'd take 100 little trips and let that grass grow. Just
Come
put
on,
it off
write
till
the
it
way
was
it's
too late.
written.
Did you hear
So-
Grandpa?
Huh?
Grandpa says, come on, Idris, read it the way it's written.
I don't know who wrote it. But there's,
Do you need some help?
Oh, I don't know where it is, it doesn't matter.
Or what?
Where a gold man is. Let me see.
I don't have a globe in that one,
You can turn that middle one off.
because when I put a globe in it, it blinks. I could turn this around, so.
Is that too bright in your face? Is that too bright on you, Grandma?
That's okay. And I've got this glued so it can't move.
Shot. Well, I think you'll deliver the goods all right. Success in all your undertakings, Lewis. I think you'll deliver the goods all right.
That's the kid that wanted to punch your lights out.
Yeah. He kind of changed his mind, I guess, after.
After you told him to bring it.
I was working for Herb Whitworth. No. I was working for Ross Redford when I met Mom. But when I married her, I was working for Herb.
And how did you meet her?
To that, and she said yes, and the rest of it's history.
What kind of dance was it?
Oh, just a high school dance, a carnival. It was a carnival dance, really. They had the fish and ponds and a few things.
Were you dancing like a fast dance, or were you just dancing to a slow song, or?
Ask her. Tell her to tell you.
How'd it go, Grandma?
Average, I'd say. The school was having some kind of they had fish ponds and kind of a little carnival along with their dancing. That was the thing that Made it interesting, I guess. Because he asked me if I wanted to go fish, and so I said yes, and I think it cost $1 for a pole or whatever we used, and I got a purse with 35 cents in it and another little thing or two, and so he thought, well, he might pay for me to go fishing again sometime if I could bring in more than it cost. That's how you make money, isn't it, Darren?
So what'd you think of Grandpa when you first met him, Grandma?
What did I think of him, what?
When you first met him?
I thought that well, I didn't think much about him when I first met him.
Yeah?
But I knew that he was a good person. And before we got married, up at our apartment one night, we both knelt by the bed and took turns praying about getting married. And we both had a good feeling about it, and so that's what we did. But my roommate, I was teaching school there at Bancroft at the time, my roommate said, do you know that guy that you're going with has got a heart that's going to kill him before long? Somehow she'd learned about it, you know, and she thought she ought to warn me. And I don't know why, but I even shed tears over that, and I didn't know much about him at the time. And then one night at a dance out to Chesterfield, he kind of wanted me to marry him, and I said, you know what, I've got my name in and making plans to go on a mission. And I'm thinking real seriously about going on a mission. He said, well, marry me and we'll go on a mission together.
Aww.
So that's what we did.
And we did.
And in 89 and 90, we went to Nashville, Tennessee. His health wasn't good, but I think we accomplished quite a bit. At least we had the experience and met a lot of people and learned to love the black people right along with the white people. And one thing that was amazing is the minute you got to the mission field, you just loved everybody that, well, at the MTC, the same thing. You know, you just all felt like brothers and sisters, and it was a wonderful experience.
Here's one thing that A. Golden Andrews wrote. Dear Keith, you have done much as a student body president. Perhaps you haven't accomplished all that you would have liked to, but you have made some improvement. Best wishes for the future. A. Golden Andrews. So, I guess he thinks I made some improvements.
So how did you propose to Grandma?
Wait, hold on.
I don't know that.
World below, with tiny lights like heaven's stars reflecting on the snow. It's as though Tanya is looking down from heaven. That neat. The sight is so spectacular. Please wipe away the tear, for I am spending Christmas with Jesus Christ this year. I hear the many Christmas songs that people hold so dear, but your sounds of music cannot compare with the Christmas choir up here. I have no words to tell you the joy their voices bring, for it's beyond description to hear the angels sing. I know how much you miss me. see the pain inside your heart, but I'm not so far away. We really aren't far apart. Be happy for me, dear ones. You know I hold you dear. Be glad I'm spending Christmas with Jesus Christ this year. I sent you each a special gift more precious than pure gold. It was always most important in the stories Jesus told. Please love and keep each other as my Father said to do, for I can't count the blessings of love He has for each of you. So have a Merry Christmas and wipe away the tear. Remember, I'm spending Christmas with Jesus Christ this year. Well done, my good and faithful servant. I'm sure you probably got a copy, but if you don't know where it's at,
I didn't even remember it.
huh? You didn't remember it? Well, then we'll put that with your things, because you need to have it.
I thought you were.
Hmm?
I rewrote Blue Christmas. I thought you were talking about that one.
That's enough. We could be here all night reading things that I've written, but they need to be more concise.
Is that recording?
Uh-huh.
So, Grandma, do you have any advice for us other generations of the secret to life or a secret to a good marriage or any of that stuff with all the things you and Grandpa have lived through and
I think the closer to the Lord you can stay, the better off you are.
No question about that.
What?
There's no question about that.
that's a good secret to life.
That's right.
Everybody, that's nothing new, but I've just learned that over the years. In fact, this very last Sunday, when it came along, we had missed 3 Sundays out of the 4 of December. And I got up that morning feeling crampy, bathroomish. And I didn't know for sure if I was going to be able to go to church. And I called our Relief Society president because I wanted to tell her about a funeral that was coming up for Tuesday. And I made the remark that I thought during the early meetings, that maybe she'd want to talk to the bishop about it and see what he'd think of letting people know about it, because it was the sister of Laurie Belmont that was our chiropractor here in the town and close to us. And so after Wendy hung up after talking to me, then you know who brought to her mind, now she said something about these early meetings. I wonder if she knows that we're starting on the other schedule and we'll be meeting at 11:30 instead of at 9 o'clock. And so she's impressed to call back and see if we know that church is starting at a different schedule now. So when she called up, of course, we didn't know that we were to be there at 11:30 instead of 9 o'clock. Well, by 11 o'clock, when we were supposed to be leaving, it was just nip and tuck. If I go, or if I dare go. So I took a few things along in case. And when we got there, I went to the restroom and we stayed 3 hours. But I prayed mightily before we left. I prayed mightily. Been helped so much. So much. And when we came home from our mission, the thing that was really a startling fact to me was on a Saturday night when I was taking a bath, get ready to go to church, I was told, send Junior Walker $50. And I said, what? And the voice again said, send Junior Walker $50. I'd never had anything happen in my life. Keith was in bed and I went in. And I told him what I'd been told, and he says, well, do it. And I said, well, it's a Saturday night. So the next Sunday was Fast Sunday. And I bore my testimony to the fact that the Lord must know me, absolutely. He knows Junior Walker, who was a guy in Alabama. No, Kentucky. Keith Jr. was from Kentucky, wasn't he? Yeah. And Junior must need something, $50. And so I told the people, when I find out the rest of the story, I'll let you know. Words to that effect. So I wrote a letter, and I wrote a check, and sent it Monday morning for sure. We waited, and we waited, and we waited, and we waited. No return. Time went by, a month or better. I finally called the bishop down there and told him that I was wanting to get in touch with Junior Walker and ask him if he died or if he was still in the ward or if he knew anything about him. And he said, Junior Walker's right here at the building. I'll have him call you before he goes home. I told him that I had been impressed to get in touch with him, and I had, and he had never, well, he didn't call. And he didn't write. And he didn't write. So we went on a trip back there. We borrowed a car in Alabama and drove it to Kentucky, and went to the church. And this night we were talking to the bishop at the church there at Tompkinsville, Kentucky. And Junior Walker came through the door. And right by me, and I looked right in his eye and I said, you owe me a letter. And he said, I know. And we thought that he'd get in touch with us before he left church that night, but he didn't. So the next day, we drove out there. We knew where he lived, of course. He wasn't home, but his son was. And his son didn't act like he really knew all the story, but he knew that we had sent money and that it was a real blessing to their family. Well, come to find out, it was an insurance policy that came due, had so many days grace on it, you know. It was a Saturday night. If that money wasn't in the mail Monday morning, they were out of insurance. And they were both in poor health, him especially. they needed that money, and they had worked their hearts out to try to get the amount, whatever it was. So this was Saturday night. They were there by themselves in a little tiny trailer home. And he looked across, he was sitting on the couch, and he looked across at a window, had a pretty good sill on it, and oftentimes the mail would get piled up. He was impressed to get up and go over there and get the stuff off of that windowsill or little table by the window or something. Anyway, right there by the window. He brought the things back and sat down. And there was my letter. His wife had gone to bed. It was getting late. She'd gone to bed crying. And he opened that letter and could not believe it. There was the exact amount he needed. He took it and went to his wife's bedside and he said, "I've got the money." She was ready to get out of that bed and lower the boom on him. She said, "There's no time to play. I know that you haven't left the house, you know." Anyway, he tells her that, shows her my check, our check. He came before we left the place that day, and so we learned how come he needed that money. Send Junior Walker $50.
Wow.
I tell you.
Wow! Well,
Excuse me, I'm making you stay up late.
let's go bed. Where's bed for? Sleep in. Let's go.
You had lots of experiences out there in the mission field, but based on our, working in the temple, being in the branch, raising a family, the things that everyday hard-working, dirty-fingered people do. This ground was pretty rough when we got here.
But I want to tell you one little experience I had. And it'll have to be in the form of a song. And I'm not much of a singer. If it was sinner instead of a singer, I might qualify. I've traveled all over the country. I've stopped at all kinds of hotels. Some were good, some were bad, and some were indifferent, and some were like living in cells. The last one I stopped to was a Daisy. You should see what they gave us to eat. On Monday we had bread on gravy. On Tuesday we had gravy on bread. On Wednesday and Thursday we had gravy on toast, but that's the same as gravy on bread. On Friday we went to the landlord to see if we could have some exchange. On Saturday night, by the way of exchange, we had gravy without any bread. Don't you think that's a pretty good hotel to stay to?
Sounds like a good menu.
Mom, did you guys hear from Grady Hammond this ahead, Dad?
No,
No,
it's
it's
right
his heart.
there.
That's in his chest area. He's built hundreds of homes and a big contractor. He got the biggest factory
Do you need an aspirin?
in the country. Soft effect. This has been the longest spell that he hasn't been. I don't know how many.
Now quit to
You
whispering.
had your 8
If
o'clock
it's worth
bill.
talking about, we're saying out loud.
She was saying that if you're having heart problems and you're having a heart attack, that if you take an aspirin, it helps. And I said, well, if you're having a heart attack, you don't feel it on the side of your heart, you feel it on the other side, usually.
Is that right, heart attack expert?
Where did you feel it when you had your heart attack, the first one?
Right in the middle of my back.
Yeah.
Right in the
stomach.
middle. Huh?
In the stomach.
I thought
It was
a stroke
just
that you
fully-
felt, but you're-
It seemed like
Heart attacks
gas.
are usually on this, either in the back
And
or
I
the
did
other
the
side.
worst thing I could have done. I gave him some soda water
Oh, yeah?
to try to get the gas out, you know. Dr. Atian said that's the worst thing I could have done.
Tell me about when you almost chopped your finger off.
When he said, whoop, there goes another.
Yeah, what was that? Tell me that one again.
Well, that was another guy, but
That was another guy.
he it was your thumb, wasn't it? That the heart that he got caught. That's your story.
Yeah.
I'll tell the middle of it. I was teaching school, correcting papers. He went, hurry.
You're doing fine.
I don't know what happened. Only when you got home.
Well, was Herb working for Herb Whitworth, and it was in the spring of the year, and he had a couple of thousand, had to use if he had to lay 'em out. And I just had to get up early in the morning, go down and help do the morning feeding, about 4 o'clock.
I did
It was a stormy day, and I got on the saddle horse. And it was, what, a couple of miles from where we lived down to the lambing sheds. Rode the horse down there and went to tie him up to the barn or to the manger. And I didn't even think about the other end of that rope being tied to the manger. I just took a hold of the rope and threw it around his neck, and boy, it tied a bowline knot in it, and just as I was finishing tying that knot in it, that horse reared back, got my thumb right in. I had a pair of leather work gloves on.
Took my hearing aid out,
Just
took
to
the battery
yank
out
that
of it.
thumb, there was nothing but bare bone
in the
from
bathroom.
here. There was no thumbnail or anything. Just stripped that, nothing but bare bone. And it put that thumbnail into the end of that glove till I had to turn the glove inside out to get it out. I borrowed the boss's car to go back to the house, and like she said, she was correcting papers, and I took that in and threw it down on the table in front of her and said, let's go to the doctor. She about passed out. But anyway,
What they do, just plop it right back on?
no. No. Went to the doctor and he said, well, I don't know whether you'll ever have a thumbnail on that or not, just what'll happen, but here's some salve if there's anything that will fix it up, that will. So we wrapped it up in that stuff and told me to keep it wrapped up in that stuff and keep it soaked with that. And I don't know how long, but it didn't even change the wrap for a good long time, just kept it soaked in that, and that's what I've got for it. But you can tell that it's shorter than the other one.
Is it?
Can't you tell it?
Yeah.
It gets cold, it's real sensitive.
But that was in 1945 died. Still a going.
But the one about whoop, there goes another one. I was telling that one.
Well, that was something to do with a carpenter. I don't even know who it was, but he
Doesn't
got it, sawed his finger off. And his neighbor said, well, how did it happen? And he, just like that, whoop, there goes another one. Dummy essence, huh?
So Dad, how many dairy cows did we run in Chesterfield?
Oh, I don't think we ever did milk over about 30.
Our move to Washington was sure something. Uncle Keldell helped us drive up. If there's any history to be recorded, that ought to be one of them.
Well, Mother, my goodness, it's 10 minutes to 11.
You remember me talking about the fact if I had Terry's poem about the shepherd typed up so I could see it better, I was going to use it at church that day. Well, it's in this orange right here.
All typed up, huh?
Huh?
All typed up.
You typed it up?
No, I said it's all typed up.
And Terry writes it as though he's one of the shepherds out there. I was a simple shepherd up high on a distant hill when this most wonderful thing happened. Oh, how I remember it still. We'd had a long day of our labors in the early fresh spring sun, and were happy to be relaxing, pleased with the work we had done. The sheep had all been safely folded, prepared and ready for night. But when the sun settled downward, the sky remained fully bright. Now, being a shepherd in charge of the flock, to take good care and to keep, I wondered how this night I would manage to take proper care of the sheep. Would the animals act adversely to such an uncommon sight? No, they were all content and peaceful, and showed not the least bit of fright. We knew then this was the wonder, predicted by prophets of past, that on the blessed tomorrow the Savior would be born at last. To the earth we then fell in reverence, beholding the wonder and awe, and pondering each one deep down in his heart the many signs that we saw. One sign we know most revealing, which we noticed in the sky afar, was the brilliance of a new illumination, the bright and a new shining star. Then reverently, as if to settle the minds on this wondrous thing, angels proclaimed hallelujah, hosannas to us they did sing. Jesus is born in Bethlehem, the whole of the earth to save, to offer us all his salvation, to release each one from the grave. The Prince of Peace he shall be to each, to one and to all, the only one who is able to redeem mankind from the fall. A king, a son living on earth, to accomplish his Father in heaven's will, to do all he was sent forth to do, and yet to be a God still. The words of the prophets were right and correct. In fact, they had all been fulfilled. And I wondered at all of the prophecies. Now how Samuel and Lamanite thrilled. A true man of God, a prophet was he, as was Abinadi, Nephi, and the rest. They had all told God's words unceasingly, and had all well completed their test. Yes, the angels told us he was born in a land across the sea. In a stable out back was delivered, in a manger of straw lay he. But here, in the new world, America, we too hold claim to his birth, for truly he was the freely given to all inhabitants of earth. The last part of that is kind of biblical, but the first part of it, to put himself over that herd of sheep when that happened, just makes me goosebump. I don't know why, but it's really I've tried to memorize it. I got about 6 verses, but last night when I was staying awake, I wondered if some of them were twisting.